Good morning, everyone. There are still people filing in, but encourage anyone who's coming in to move towards the front, as this is a morning session, but we're going to ask for some interaction. So, we're grateful to gather today on the treaty lands of the Mississaugas, of the Credit First Nation, and the ancestral lands of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe Nations, since time immemorial to today. Welcome to this session, What Works? Identifying industry-led solutions to advance ESG literacy and capacity building. I'm Anthony Roberts, I'm Director of Investor Education at the PRI, and I'll be moderating today's session. This session will be varied and interactive. We have a fantastic speaker, a panel of industry experts, and we'll be looking for some interactions from you on your tables. We'll be highlighting shared challenges around a lack of cross-functional responsible investment literacy and the impact that this has on ESG teams and those accountable for the success of responsible investment strategies. In the second half of the session, we hope to explore some practical solutions as to what works when it comes to responsible investment capacity building. And following this session, we're going to publish a summary of the findings in a form of a practical guide which you can take away to help improve ESG fluency in your organizations. And at the end of the session, I'll put up a QR code which you can scan to register your details to receive that guide. So, let's begin. The theme of the conference has been advancing progress on responsible investment practice. And we know that training is one of the most significant obstacles to improving practice. So, why is that? And what are the challenges we face? Well, we know the key drivers of responsible investment in the long term remain relevant and strong. These issues are material. We only need to see the hurricanes going through Florida at the moment to see that. Clients want responsible investment products. And with a generational shift of wealth, that demand is increasing. Regulation continues to demand greater disclosure and greater focus on these issues across the globe. And meanwhile, evidence shows that ESG incorporation does not come at a cost. So the question is not whether we should invest responsibly. The question is, how do we do that? And how do we advance our practice? And today we start to look at some of the things that might present obstacles to that. And one obstacle is, with the rapid growth of responsible investment, demand is outpacing the supply of skills. Indeed, although sustainability skills are some of the most sought-after skills in the finance sector, analysis of some million profiles of investment professionals on LinkedIn showed fewer than 1% had disclosed sustainability-related skills on their profiles. And what's interesting is this isn't a static problem. Maybe 6-7 years ago at PRI in person, we'd have been discussing the challenge of creating the next generation of ESG leaders, the experts to drive strategies and develop policies. We can see we have that now. We have 1,700 of your colleagues in this room who are engaged, who understand the issues, who have fantastic strategies in their organizations. The challenge now is that successful ESG incorporation requires a common language and understanding right the way through organizations, at all levels and in all roles. ESG teams are overwhelmed. They struggle to delegate. They have challenges in implementing and communicating their ESG approaches and strategies. All the more complex questions that clients have are increasingly sent back to those teams, further creating challenge. And you can have the best strategy in the world, but unless you can communicate that effectively to clients, unless you can have those people responding to DDQs, answering those questions, able to articulate your position, you simply won't win the benefits of responsible investment in terms of inflows. And emerging evidence is showing that ESG training is critical to the successful realization of the benefits of responsible investment. And back at this conference in Tokyo, we had research presented by Yusha Zhou, who was then at the Cambridge Judge Business School, that showed the duration of an organization's commitment to responsible investment, unsurprisingly, is connected to realizing the benefits associated with that. The risk-adjusted returns, the capital attraction, the portfolio performance, improvement in ESG performance. Now, external factors, of course, are important. The client demand we've talked about, the knowledge and the support from events like this and the PRI and regulators driving this. But she also found what was very important were internal resources. And Yusha looked back over the transparency reports from the PRI, seeking to find whether there were any predictive measures. And what she found was that the provision of widespread training in organizations was the single most robust factor in predicting whether and how long an organization stays committed to responsible investment. So, in Tokyo, we set the scene. We identified that training was critically important. Now, we hone in on that problem, and we start to assess where those skills gaps lie and what we might be able to do to practically address those. And I'd like to introduce our first speaker at this point, who will talk about a pioneering study in Singapore's financial services and capital markets sector, which mapped sustainability-related skills across all job functions. So let me introduce our first speaker, Herry Cho. Herry is Managing Director and Head of Sustainability at SGX Group. She drives their sustainability strategy to transform it and its ecosystem into a world-class sustainable exchange. She serves as alternate director at Impact X, is a steering group member of GFANS, an advisory board at the National University of Singapore's Sustainability and Green Finance Institute, and I am delighted to welcome her today to talk about this study. Herry.
Good morning. I look so tech-on savvy right now because my iPad that I normally use has decided to take holiday in Vancouver airport. So hopefully I will meet it again on the way back. Okay, let me just try to fit this. Okay. Sorry, just one moment. Yes, this one, I think. Okay, so I just wanted to help set the scene today a little bit for everyone. Some of you may know that 13% of Singapore's GDP is from the financial sector. So it is a very significant portion of the national GDP. And already back in 2019, there was a study done to actually map literally every single JD in the financial sector, and the JD itself, technical skill sets required, and the soft skill sets required. That is the report on the left-hand side. I am going to be coming back to this, so please do try to save the QR code at the very least. The one at the bottom, the interactive skills, is a fascinating one. And then furthermore, in 2024, there was a jointly commissioned study by MAS and IBF, which is the national education accreditation body in Singapore, in order to create what's called a sustainable finance jobs transformation map. And I happen to be one of the steering committee members that drove that work for a period of about a year and a half. Again, you can download the report from the QR code that you find there. The objectives of the study were a number of folds. So firstly, to validate Singapore's financial sector sustainable finance strategy, which essentially were to support the region's transition to net zero for one, and to be Asia's leading sustainable finance hub and an investment gateway for the region as well. Secondly, to support the financial sector workforce job and skills planning, and to equip the workforce for the changes that are to come. Thirdly, to support the sector's workforce development, and fourthly, to provide recommendations to close the job skills gap itself. So just going straight into what were some of the key insights. It's a very long report. It maps out literally 218 jobs in the whole of the financial sector, which are clearly applicable across anywhere in the world. So what it found was that 56% of jobs in the financial sector will see new sustainable finance or SF-related tasks added to their jobs to a moderate to high degree. So we're not talking about only addition of new jobs or just the sustainable finance people or sustainable investing folks, but 56% of all jobs. And most of these need the augmentation within the next 3 years. So we're not talking 10 years' time, next 3 years. There are about 20 unique job roles, which are the highest priority for upskilling, which I'll touch upon later. And there will still be creation of new jobs in Singapore that translates into about 4,000 to 5,000 new jobs in areas such as sustainability risk and sustainability strategy. What has this led to? It has led to setting aside $27 million equivalent to develop and create the training required for the financial sector workforce. Now, there were 3 phases to the work that was performed, which I'm just about to go into now. Phase 1 was looking at the trends analysis. And there were 3 key components of the trends analysis. Number 1, what is the real economy demand? Secondly, what's the impact of regulation and standards? And thirdly, it was about technology and innovation. The phase 2, which I'll talk more about, is the impact analysis. And phase 3, which I'll also talk more about, is the skills analysis. What are the skills needed? I hope it's not too small and you can see it. If you want the slides, you can ask the PRI folks. Very happy to share these. So as I mentioned, 218 job roles were analyzed in the study. Whilst pretty much every subsector and every career track will be impacted, let's just talk about top 3 for now. So for the career tracks, on the right-hand side, professionals in risk, compliance, and legal will have highest number of high augmentation to moderate augmentation required. Secondly, product solutioning and management, and digital and data analytics. And so they will really have to rapidly undergo some changes to skill sets that they need and need to acquire over time. In terms of the subsectors within the financial industry, private banking and wealth management, asset management, investment banking will also see high to moderate job augmentations. I will give specific examples in a moment. So let's just talk about the third and final part of the study, which is analysis of the skills that will be required. And TSCs, which stand for Technical Skills and Competencies, so TSCs, essentially there were identification of 12 key TSCs that will be required not only for sustainable finance folks, but across all of the FS. And then there were further segmentation of which ones would be most required. So there were 8 which would be most required for across the subsector, and 4 in particular, which cuts across all. And those were sustainability risk management, taxonomy application, climate change management, and impact indicators measurement and reporting. I mentioned there are 20 unique job roles that have been prioritized for the upskilling of the skill sets, the TSCs, and they cut across a number of functions such as sales, after-sales, distribution, relationship management. So these are job families that already exist within the job family mapping of the financial sector, product solutioning and management, risk compliance and legal, digital and data analytics, sustainability, trading, and execution on operations. I'm going to delve into 2 of them as an example. One will be portfolio management, and the second will be product sales. So on the left-hand side of the table, you will see what would be the bog standard normal critical work function, not in completion, but we've picked out the ones which in particular need augmentation from SF skill set perspective. So execute strategic decisions and performance evaluation would require some additional key sustainability job tasks, such as incorporating sustainability factors. These are actually things that we already know, but it's really just systemically laying this out and adding on training and funding to make this a reality. Incorporate sustainability factors, provide recommendations to enhance sustainability performance of portfolio. The impact on the job task is high augmentation required. Okay. Across all, there were two TSCs that were in particular identified to be the highest level of augmentation. Those are sustainable investment management skill sets and sustainability stewardship development skill sets. I'll just take one other example at the bottom, compliance with investment management agreements. So you have to ensure that the portfolio is aligned with sustainability-related guidelines, whether it's regulatory or voluntary that you have committed to your clients, and keep up to date with new sustainable investment guidelines. The interesting part is that this does not only live in a paper or that people read once and forget about. There is the first QR code that I showed you is an interactive map where you can click on any job family and delve further into every single job description. And there, the technical skill sets have been incorporated, and those are the ones that you see in purple. Okay? And you can further click onto each of these purple to see what exactly are the skill sets that's required. Another example is on the sales and distribution specialists. Some of them, in terms of the description, have been aggregated. So this one includes both asset management and investment banking sides, so both the buy and the sell side. Some of the critical work functions that are already known include acquiring and managing clients, determining clients' needs, recommending solutions to clients. And these will all have specific additional key sustainability job tasks added to them, such as conducting market research, financial analysis related to new sustainability financial products, and we all know that's happening all the time. And that one would require moderate augmentation, so there's 3 different level 3 augmentation, 5 being the highest level of augmentation. Determining clients' needs, you have to perform the client profile analysis and determine the appropriate new sustainability products to meet their needs. Again, moderate augmentation. Again, what this translates into is whoever wants to see the overall JD and overall skill sets and even soft skill sets required, you will see the sustainability TSCs specifically added to them, highlighted in purple, and it's actually permanently purple for now because these are the latest additions. So how can this be applied beyond just looking at individual JDs? And this is across the different ecosystem. Clearly, different players and stakeholders need to act together. To give example of a few, government bodies, whether that's regulators or governments themselves, can work together with industry associations. I'm on the top right-hand side of the slide to define specific sustainable finance certification and accreditation needs. For there to be certain level of standardization, a seal of approval that a training course is of a certain standard. And to build partnerships between the financial sector and the non-financial sector or the real economy, or however you want to call it, would be a role that both can play. Industry associations, also on the other hand, we've seen a number of sustainable or green finance associations pop up all around the globe, which is fantastic to see. That really actually acts as a catalyst within a country or within the jurisdiction to establish a community and sharing and reduce duplication of work that's required. Government bodies and financial institutions can work together to chart long-term sustainable finance career paths. One of the findings from the numerous interviews that were done also with the industry in order to get to this was that actually for some sustainable investing or finance professionals, what is next is not so clear. You might be head of sustainable investing, what next, right? So there can be some charting down around there. FIs can support capacity transfer internally as well. If there is a certain very specific skill set that's really good in another country, then you can transfer it over for short-term assignments, etc. And then training providers and financial institutions can work together to develop training programs and content that befits the needs very specifically of the audience that you can now segment out further. Of course, at the firm level within the FI, individuals can use it to chart their own career path and skill sets that they need. HR, business unit heads, they can all use this for workforce planning, training, L&D, and of course the CEOs, chief sustainability officers, chief strategy officers can use this as a strategic planning component. So I'm going to leave the sort of scene setting here, and whilst I walk off, I will just put up there the coverage of the study across the different subsectors and the career tracks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Herry. That's an incredibly valuable and comprehensive study. But it's so much more than that. It provides a really clear, practical guide for organizations, for bodies like PRI and others to understand how the sector's changing and what needs to be provided in terms of training and education for the next set. And I think next steps. And I think what's so exciting about it, I love the way you talk about augmented skills. We're not talking about a skills gap. We're talking about how we can continue to upskill and give people these new tools to deal with this changing world of finance and investment. And we're not trying to train people to be analysts. We're trying to give them a new set of data and tools to think about the risks and opportunities and to change their practice. So we've heard about that rapid transformation of the finance sector. We've seen the scale of the challenge we have before us. And now what I'd like to do is to introduce our fantastic panel. We have asset owners, managers, we have a regulator, and they're going to talk about their experiences of the skills gap and the challenges that that's created. So first up, we have Emily Lawrence. Emily is American Director of Sustainable Investing Client Engagement at Northern Trust, where she's responsible for client engagement and partnerships on Northern Trust's sustainable investing capabilities. We have Navina Balasingam. Navina is General Manager of Capital Markets Malaysia, which is part of the Securities Commission Malaysia. So mandated with promoting Malaysia's capital markets, but also overseeing content development, programs and engagements to build capacity in sustainable finance and Islamic capital markets. We have Derek Rizicki, who is Executive Director and Head of Responsible Investing at Mubadala Investment Company. He's been a member of Mubadala's senior executive team since 2006. And since joining Mubadala, he has overseen the structuring and execution of more than $100 billion of financing across the Mubadala Group. And finally, we have Lamia Yushuten, who is Chief Global Sustainability Officer and the Tixis Investment Manager. She leads the sustainability office there and has over 19 years experience working in a variety of roles and functions and geographies across Natixis. Welcome to the panel. Thank you. Thank you. So we've asked each of the panel to reflect on that existence of a skills gap in their own organizations, reflect what it means to them, and how these gaps really manifest themselves on the ground. What are the particular pain points they cause? What does it mean when it comes to operationalizing their responsible investment policy or strategy? So, Emily, I'd like to turn to you first.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. And I think all of the sustainable investing practitioners in this room will not be surprised by the idea that better employee training and employee engagement leads to happier employees and better outcomes. That seems pretty intuitive for us in this space. I think some of the points that Herry pointed out here around areas of skills gaps and where we're going to need to drive engagement and education are very similar to the ones that we're seeing within our practice at Northern Trust Asset Management. I think there's a top-down need coming from the organization, and that's being driven by two key trends that I'll point out here. One is the pace of change. I've been in the sustainable investing industry for about 17 years. Over that time, it looks spectacularly different today than it did back in the early 2000s, right? We have a completely different regulatory regime. The regulatory regime is fragmented and asymmetrical depending on the region that you're in. We have individuals across risk, compliance, legal, product, operations, all of these different functions who perhaps have relied primarily on their sustainable investing partners to drive the conversation. And yet now there's a recognition that they too need to take more of a stance and take on more of the responsibility, really integrating their approach to sustainable investing through that operational reporting, compliance-driven lens. The other key trend here is really around jargon. And jargon is again, not a surprise to any of the people in this room, right? We're talking about a host of different terms that we often use and our clients use interchangeably that create a lot of headaches and a lot of confusion. And so as we're approaching training, a lot of it is about how do we clarify the language? How do we speak with one voice internally and externally with our clients so that we're all incredibly clear and consistent in how we talk about things? And you're talking very much about easing the burden on sustainable investing teams. That's a big part of this, right? That top-down need is certainly one of the drivers that we're seeing, but we're also seeing a bottom-up demand. We have individuals across our organization from, again, a host of different functions who are recognizing that the demands on their time and their expertise require them to be fluent in sustainable investing. And they're looking to us to help them navigate this space, but they're recognizing that we cannot be the bottleneck. We cannot be the silo. This has to be integrated operational wide. So having a more holistic approach to training and fluency, I think is good for employee morale, certainly, and feeling like they are part of that future skills gap solution that Herry's talking about, but also allowing them to take on more responsibility and more decision-making power, more accountability within their specific function in a way that's more coordinated and clear and consistent.
Thank you so much. And Navina, you are responsible, of course, for building capacity across a whole country's capital markets. What are the challenges that you've seen?
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Anthony. So I represent, I guess, taking it from a very different lens compared to my fellow panelists, I represent the Securities Commission Malaysia, which is the capital market regulator in Malaysia. And we have a dual mandate, which is not only to regulate the capital market, but also to foster market development. And I think it was 5 years ago now that Malaysia set its net zero target to be carbon neutral by 2050. And with that, there was identification that we would have to have 70% renewable energy capacity by 2050. And a big task for Malaysia, because we are primarily a country that focuses on, our key sectors are manufacturing, energy, oil and gas. So getting to 70% renewable energy capacity, we knew was going to be a challenge because one of the key issues was that the sector was not getting enough financing or investment. So we really needed to get our asset owners and asset managers ready to invest in the sector and also to get our banks ready to finance the sector. So we did a couple of surveys to understand where we were. And interestingly, so the survey was with asset owners in Malaysia as well as asset managers, foreign and domestic. And the survey results indicated to us that asset owners are quite far ahead in Malaysia, which is a good thing because they have a lot of influence in investing in this sector. But between the asset managers, the foreign firms, like the likes of Franklin Templeton, Nomura, they were quite ahead, but our domestic asset managers really needed a lot of help. So the challenge for us is twofold: to get the industry ready, to get the investment community ready to understand not just the technical issues of investing in the energy transition, which for us meant having a good understanding of what it is to invest in hydrogen, in transition fuels, CCUS, those sorts of things, but also that there was a big gap in investment in sustainable investing methodology. So these are the key areas that we had to look at. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And Derek, you come from a quite unique asset owner. It'd be interesting to hear your perspective on this.
Sure. I think it's no surprise to all of us that having strong fluency across the organization at every level in every job function is a super critical aspect of having agile and quick execution, particularly in a space like the private markets where Mubadala does a lot of work. Also, not just through our GPs and private asset managers, but in direct investing. So we really need to build that fluency internally in our organization. Of course, there's a lot of things that influence this, everything from tone from the top through to organizational culture. But given that we have about 3 minutes to talk, I'm going to focus on two really tactical things that we have realized as we've worked on building fluency. The first is that training in and of itself has diminishing returns pretty quickly. You have often a group of people who are very interested and dedicated and pick up the training and run with it. But the vast majority of the population is either very busy or got a lot on their mind and not sure what to do with the jargon as we throw it across the tables with them. Or there are people that are just genuinely disinterested. So I think we've had to realize that sort of on-the-job training is perhaps an even more critical part of that training process. So as we've built our structures out, we really move quickly through getting the fundamentals on the table, but quickly into tactical implementation, taking our deals and pushing them through the system and working sort of on the job through the technical aspects, deal by deal with our employees. Again, coming around to the speed of the transition and everything that's going on, as was mentioned earlier, we don't have time to wait and do endless training with people to build their fluency. We just need to get on with it. And in fact, it's been a more effective way of building that core fluency within the organization. The second thing comes around a little bit to the jargon issue. What we found both internally and as a broad comment on the sustainability or ESG movement is that we have not spent enough time translating what we're doing into and aligning it into the business cycles and business speak. We're trying to make our business people speak our sustainability speak, right? And we are throwing acronym after acronym at them. And I'm sure many of you have seen the glazed look that people get when you start talking about taxonomies and they start playing with the pencils and looking at their phones. And so you lose them really quickly when we speak in our vernacular. And we also, interestingly, haven't paid enough attention about engaging them in the rhythm of business, right? And so we want to talk about our issues when it's the right time for us, as opposed to aligning it with both their processes and the rhythm of execution across the organization, but also using their tools and practices. So we, as we built out our fluency building program, recognized that actually aligning everything we do with business practice is important, from translating our literal words into business speak and helping people understand why it's important to them, not why it's important to us and our sustainability agenda, but why it's important to the businesses, through to aligning with the decision nodes, through to aligning with their, building on top of the softwares that they're already using for managing their relationships and their deals and all that kind of stuff. So alignment with business in every sense has also been a really important enabler and catalyst to building that fluency within the organization.
Thank you so much, Derek. And Lamia, Natixis is a multi-boutique, multi-asset, global investment manager. What are the challenges that you find as a global head of sustainability?
That resonates very well with me because I feel like it's a mini industry on its own. We are 18 autonomous manager under Natixis Investment Manager, managing over $1 trillion with a strong presence in the US, in Europe, and some presence in Asia. Across all asset classes, equity, fixed income, real estate, and all the spectrum of sustainability, from ESG integration to impact. So to maybe sum up what the other panelists said, and also what Herry was saying, actually I try to reflect in terms of what are the drivers for these gaps and needs in the different functions. I found 4 factors for that. The first one, and it resonates well with what you said, Derek, around the business fluency and the client's needs. We are here to serve clients, to support them in their transition need, in their sustainability investment needs. So we need the sales and distribution team to speak the language of the client. And many of them are here in the room. The asset owners are becoming much more sophisticated in talking about sustainability. So we need to equip the sales team with the right language. Yeah, taxonomy is one of them. But also about the trends on circularity, climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and all this kind of things. So there is a need to speak the language of the clients because we want to build the solution with them. And there is an education of the clients. We have also retail clients, and actually they ask a lot of questions around ESG products, and we need to explain the performance and what's happening. So that's another aspect that the sales and distribution team need also to act as an education for the clients. So that's the first one. The second one is regulation. And as I said, we have a strong presence in Europe. And you may know that the regulator there has been very creative in sustainable investing, with a taste for complexity, I may say, because I don't know if you come across SFDR products, Article 8, 9, and all the concept, DNSH, PIA, you need to be really very focused to follow the rules of labeling under this regime. There are new label regime in the UK, for example, and the SDR. So I guess there will be others in the world. So that requires, compliance team to understand this regulation, but more importantly, to be able to operationalize this regulation to the product team and also the portfolio manager team, because the construction of the ESG products need to be embedded in the way that the product is managed and the strategy of investment is done with a lot of constraints. There are thresholds on the proportion of ESG factor that need to be followed. So there is a need for collaboration. And as you said, Emily, I think it cannot be an ESG team doing all of that. So compliance need to understand ESG strategies to speak the good language with the PM. The PM needs to understand regulation because they need to embed it into their strategies, and the product team needs to have an overview of all these regulation coming up. So the third factor is around what is happening in the world. And I think in these 3 days of the conference, this message has been conveyed very clearly that the world is transitioning, and the scale of this transition is of the industrial revolution. And this, we see it, in the company we invest in, the sector we observe. So the analyst needs almost engineering skills to understand hydrogen, ammonia, regenerative agriculture, you need land scientists and all this kind of thing if you really want to dig deep into the transition risk and understand what is really happening on these companies, and to be able to identify the winner and the loser. And this is what is the aim of the research team. So understanding this, and having this skill within the research team to be able to assess it in a good way, I think is an important one. The fourth one is risks. We have this transition risk in general. And I think we are in a part of the world where, unfortunately, we see the impact of physical risk in a very clear way, with the fire, the hurricane, and all this kind of thing. And these require a lot of modeling, data mining, scenario building, and we can see that the risk teams need to build capacities and capabilities for safe growth and be able, to modelize all this risk. I have been this morning to the breakfast around climate scenarios, and it's true. There is not good model apparently, but there are useful models. So the risk team needs to be equipped to be doing this kind of thing, to understand climate, almost climate scientists. So yeah, a lot happening in the world that require a lot of capacity building.
Thank you so much. I think there's some real clear shared challenges coming through here around the scale of the issue, the speed of the transition required, the need for this common language and understanding, whether it's across different functions within the organization or the communication between asset owner, asset manager, clients and stakeholders. And I think also it's really important, as Herry presented in the Singapore study, this is about augmentation. This isn't about responsible investment being something separate, but it's about it being a core skill of every finance and investment professional. And I think we need to move to a position where anyone involved in investment is as comfortable talking and working in the language and practice of responsible investment as they are talking about market conditions or portfolio performance. And that's how deeply ingrained it needs to be. So at this stage, we were going to have a table discussion around the challenges that you've all found. I sense that on the first morning of the last day of the conference, you're probably not going to be too upset if we miss that, and we'll make some more room for questions instead. But what I would like to put up is a Slido question. And I'd like you all just to take a couple of moments to really reflect on what you've heard from the panel, your own experience, and to share your insights around what are the practical consequences that you've seen in your organizations, in your jurisdictions, around this ESG skills gap. Fantastic. I can see people are typing away there. So we can come back to these in a moment when we do some questions and answers. But at this point, really, we turn to... sorry, I can't move on. We'll hold on a moment on this slide whilst we collect some answers here. So the panel can also see what's coming up here. Have any of you... do any of these comments coming up resonate with you? And is there anything you could touch on in relation to these?
Well, I've seen greenwashing come up a couple of times, and I think that's, pulling off of the thread that Lamia mentioned, really focusing in on the risks of potentially overstating or understating, running afoul of the changing regulatory environment. And that regulatory environment, again, is somewhat fragmented depending on the market that you're in and the investors that you're speaking to. So the need to clarify communication and clarify the language is a de-risking exercise. It's really about building confidence, and a lot of that is confidence in individuals who are on the front lines of those discussions. So the distribution staff, making sure that they feel empowered and comfortable with the language, the definitions that are used internally, how that framing works, so that they don't fear going out in market and misstating things.
Absolutely. There was a comment that came up a moment ago about how the ESG teams are responsible for so much across the organization and different functions. And I think that sense that it's becoming this sort of bottleneck where questions from clients come back, questions from all over the organization. And that's on top of all the other things you have to do around disclosure, setting your strategies, your policies. How does that manifest itself for your teams and organizations?
I think I might say it's obviously a little bit different for the ultimate asset owner. I would reiterate that what I've seen over the last 3.5 years that I've been in this role, the sophistication of the asset owners is increasing at a very rapid rate. We've got a lot of different types of integration and modes and modalities of that. But the trend is up significantly, and I think for the asset management firms generally, what they are realizing is that there is no getting away from this. And so, a little bit of the on-the-job training concept. They can't possibly always kick it over to the sustainability teams because there'll be too much volume for them to be able to handle it. So there will be a necessity that at least on the basic questions on the front line, those colleagues will have to be able to manage the questions to satisfy their clients' needs. And so I'm excited about that at sort of a grassroots level, and so I think that will be a natural driver of the average salesperson or client-facing person building their capability. They don't have to be experts. The black belt questions need to come to the sustainability teams, but I think there's a good trend line on that.
Thank you. Lamia, how do you find this from an asset manager perspective?
I think definitely, it resonates. I think a lot of ESG team will tell you that they are overwhelmed to try to keep up with all the things happening over the world. So the choices will be either to invest massively in one central team or to look at across the organization and try to see, what are the champions in each department that can be working instead of one central ESG team sitting on the side, which I think is not the right way, or defining, champions, point of contact in each department that can work in a cross-functional way that will spread the knowledge in the different department, can be the point of contact for the ESG teams, because anyway, I'm not sure that no one will accept a 10 FTE increase for the ESG team in one go. So there are a lot of resource constraints for hiring. So developing this cross-functional organization for me was key, and having like this champion community across the organization. Which I hope will lower the burden on the ESG teams.
Thank you. There's just one last one I'd like to touch on. We've had a point here around the politicization of ESG and responsible investment. And I think it's very interesting to think about what that means from a training perspective. And certainly I think, as I see it, it's absolutely critical in a more politicized environment that those client-facing teams are really clear on the language of responsible investment, what the organization is doing and what it isn't doing, and to be particularly, to have that level of confidence and comfort in working in that environment. And perhaps, Emily, as you're in North America and you're based in distribution, it'd be interesting to hear your perspective on that.
Well, again, I think it comes down to really being very clear and consistent, right? We are at peril of green hushing and at peril of green washing. And so it behooves us, to use a ridiculous word, it behooves all of us to, again, feel very clear and comfortable in how we're thinking about sustainability factors. And as we're having these conversations across the US, there's a focus here on topics that are pecuniary and material versus where they're politically driven or values driven. And we're having conversations across the board, internally and externally, because education and training is also an exercise of what we're doing in our client interactions, right? Let's talk about how sustainable investing is a big tent. There's a lot of data and analytics that goes under that tent, and we can use those data points and all of that information in different ways. The reason we have so many custom SMAs, and I'll speak to our business, but I think this is probably true of others, is that from a values perspective in particular, no two clients have the same set of values. Values and ethics are largely unique. There may be some areas of alignment, but they're very seldom the same. I think it's important that we really focus in on the difference between what is clearly driven by materiality, how do we layer these different data sets into the portfolio construction process in a way that is directed by our clients to meet their specific goals and needs. And to focus in on that materiality piece, we're members of the investor advisory group for the ISSB. We really do lean into frameworks like the ISSB standards, like the recommendations of the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, as defined best practices for looking at these material risks and really creating the clarity between all of the different data sets and factors that sort of fall under that big tent.
I may add to that a tactical success that we've had. Moving beyond the values and the ethical discussions, we've found a lot of success with people who are maybe a little bit more reluctant, just getting right into the detail and leveraging from the most basic concepts, like talking about physical risk of our assets, and pointing to things like what's happening in Florida or wherever a natural disaster happens, and building from the very, very bottom up, and helping people see the interrelationships and drawing that connective tissue between these fundamental core issues that frankly have been managed in business for decades. But what we are able to do now is to get much more sophisticated tools to be able to analyze these issues in a more comprehensive way across the portfolio. But building from the bottom up, instead of coming down and saying, let's talk sustainability, and okay, let's go to the core, some of the core issues that we know everybody is, any business person who is focused on driving value creation, value preservation is going to have considered in the context of their business over time. And that builds momentum and an openness and helping them see, connecting those to this concept of sustainability or ESG, whatever the terminology you use. It's been incredibly effective in our organization to opening up our investment professionals to building this into their cycle, because it's talking to them in language they understand, at times they understand, on topics they understand, and we can move outward and upward from there. And so we start to get comments from our business professionals within our organization, our business developers and asset managers, saying things like, well, not only do I feel like we're addressing these sustainability issues better, but we're going to have better deals and better returns and better outcomes because we have a more comprehensive engagement on these issues. You're making progress when you start getting things like that. And you can do it if you build from the bottom up and just sidestep this whole politicized agenda.
Thank you so much. I think we're really now moving into the second part of the discussion here, which is what works. What are those practical solutions, those organizational-wide strategies that start to address this skills gap, to make people integrate these issues into the way they're working across their different functions, and to address that lack of understanding? And perhaps, Navina, I could turn to you. You have this responsibility as part of Capital Markets Malaysia to build capacity across the industry and to promote Malaysian capital markets as a market that is thinking about and integrating these issues effectively. Could you talk to the audience a little bit about what you've used and what you found particularly effective in doing that?
Sure, thanks, Anthony. So just to pick up on what I was saying before about when we had done the survey and understood where the training needs lie, it was a little bit difficult because we had to toggle between the advancement of our asset owners versus perhaps the asset managers who were, not as sophisticated. And that is a problem, to Derek's point, that you have to get the asset managers up to the level of the asset owners, or at least close, right? So we are fortunate that in Malaysia, the Securities Commission has a capital market development fund that was available to us to start doing capacity building. So we set up a center of excellence. It's called the Sustainable Investment Platform, which is a collaboration between the Securities Commission and the Institutional Investors Council of Malaysia. We started to look at what sort of capacity building we should provide, and we were able to do that at no cost to the asset managers, particularly the domestic ones. Unfortunately, when we first started, it was just right smack at the time that COVID started. So initially, we had to do everything via webinar, but it did sort of turn out to be a blessing in disguise because we were able to leverage, our first port of call was to PRI, and PRI was very happy to support the initiative and would introduce us to subject matter experts from all over the world. So we were able to really leverage on this relationship and to just call on people to do webinars for our asset owners and asset managers on the very core topics of developing investment methodology capability. And like I said, another big piece for Malaysia was to really understand the technicalities of everything that we're asking our asset managers and asset owners to invest in. These new renewable energy technologies, there was so much hesitance to invest in project owners because of a lack of awareness of what it all meant. So that was really the cost that we took. But eventually, we also realized that we needed to do something a bit more large scale, a bit more in depth. So in fact, in December last year, we launched a program called the PRI in Practice Certification Program with PRI Academy, where we are sponsoring our asset owners and asset managers to go through this very comprehensive program. It's a blended program where we have PRI Academy come in the beginning to do like a full day in-house in Malaysia on all the various methodologies, strategic allocation techniques and all of that. And then there is 15 hours of virtual training that is conducted over the course of 6 months. And then a refresher course that PRI does for us as well. So we have found this to be very, very useful. I think we're really seeing an uplift in how our asset managers are performing. So yeah, that's my view.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I think one of the in developing that program, one of the things that's so important to you was to try and embed this into practice. It couldn't just be a one-hit training. We had to create that cohort, that momentum, that sense that this was something people were going away and trying to integrate into their own practice and reflecting on that experience and the challenges and having those discussions.
That's right. And the thing is, interestingly, when we did put it out there through the Institutional Investors Council, we thought that the asset managers would all sign on, but it was the asset owners who were signing on in large groups. So there is still a lot of work for us to do, but it was also very important that we made sure that the case studies that were presented were localized, because we are far behind the US and Europe. So there is a lot more that we need to do. Yeah.
Thank you. And Lamia, how when you have, again, this sort of multi-boutique structure, how do you create those relevant, impactful capacity building and training programs?
I think one driving principle, as what I said just earlier, is that ESG should be inside, embedded in the operation and not sitting in the room, alone. And this drive, I think, maybe I will say 3 types of actions. One, on the organization side, I think there is a need to make choices on 2 things. The positioning on the ESG team, how close they are to the CIO or the CEO. I think I was looking to some of the comments from the audience around championing and sponsorship. I think that's an important point because it will drive a lot of other things. And also, we try to have experts within different departments. For example, for the sales and distribution, as I said, it's really key for us to have this business fluency. We created a dedicated role of client sustainable investing within the distribution team, sitting within the sales platform that can go to some meeting with clients, but more importantly, educate the sales team in a continuous, small bites, not like heavy training, but more like regular webinar on different themes. The themes are driven by the feedback that they get from the clients and the emerging trends and this kind of thing. So having like ESG experts within some department, we did the same with the technology team, with an ESG data expert. For the research and analyst team, I think separating ESG and non-ESG from my perspective doesn't make sense. So maybe developing the capacity of the research team to, maybe get trained on the new trend, etc. But I think putting them together and having maybe some people with the strong expertise there and more promotes the collaboration is what we think is working well. So that's on the organizational side. The second set of action is, I would say, more culture, sustainability culture, rather than just capability. And for that, for driving culture, you need tone from the top. I think cannot work otherwise. So I think the support of the CEO is really key, and I think you will all say that can open a lot of doors and can make things easier. For example, the CEO sponsoring like a change program that is driving some culture changes. For example, embedding ESG in town halls, embedding ESG in leadership seminars, this kind of thing, creating like regular conferences, bringing internal expert, external expert to regularly share knowledge about, I don't know, water stress, critical mineral, and things like this that are actually resonate with what Derek is saying. Beyond ESG, there are real-world issues. I think these are real challenges for the companies and interest everyone, not only the people who are facing product or client demand, but can interest everyone. So that's more on the like cultural drive and keeping up people about awareness on ESG matters. And we, as part of this change program, we also worked with HR to build a kind of training. And how this was built actually was trying to say, okay, what's the minimum requirements for all the staff on this matter? And try to find a solution to have a minimum requirements for the staff. We thought about the new joiners and how to maybe think of more fun way, serious games. I don't know if you have seen, there are serious games or ESG where you can save an island and make some investment choices. So try to bring them into ESG in a more fun way, and maybe in a way that they know. And then we are working in more developing pathways actually for and tailor-made for risk, compliance, more like investment teams with different level on ESG, but this is more of a continuous effort. The third element of action is more partnership, but as I said, all these issues are really so complex, and some of our affiliates, for example, just a partner with Columbia University, for example, in the US, when creating a research center, to keep up on developing these issues and creating, material and thought leadership. But I think this is really key because, we are an asset manager. There are things that we can do internally, and there are things that we cannot.
Thank you so much. And I think, training needs to be so much more than another sort of tick box compliance type exercise. Yeah. It really needs to be embedded into the culture, the expectations, the ways of working of the organization. Derek, we've spoken quite a lot about the role of the asset owners in leading this, and for Mubadala, where you make multiple direct investments, it'd be interesting to hear your perspective on Mubadala's role in integrating this into the sort of the deal and the investment process and educating your investees as well as the internal team.
Sure. So I think what we have, we've made tremendous progress in institutionalizing something that was core to us. We were established as a development company to diversify the economy of the UAE and Abu Dhabi away from oil back in the early 2000s. And so these environmental, social constructs were always, and considerations were always important to us, but we hadn't institutionalized it in the flow of deal making. And I think we realized in the 2020 that with all of the fantastic work that had been done on the academic side and the sort of framework side, that there was a lot more to work with, and it was time to really bring this together in an institutionalized manner. And so we formed the responsible investing team, which is not the investment function, but rather the steward of ESG integration across the group, both in the corporate operations, but perhaps much more impactfully in our investment life cycle, across our investment life cycle. So we now have a team of 15 professionals that are focused on partnering with our investor team members, providing that expertise to help us assess environmental, social, and governance considerations from the very beginning of the deal. We message so that they are looking for it when they're doing their sourcing of deals early on. And every transaction that goes through our organization now is subject to an assessment that we do in conjunction with our deal teams. We built an internal model that we call our sustainable returns model. It is very investor focused. We're not an activist, right? We're focused on sustainability factors that drive value creation and value preservation. That's core to our mandate as a sovereign wealth fund, which is providing for future generations, both financially, but it's also core to that part of our mandate, which is providing a livable world for future generations also. Money means nothing unless you have somewhere to, a livable world to bring that, to use that capital. And so our model comes in at the time that we start to diligence our deals. It's part of the every investment committee decision. There's a template that has to be filled out. And then the model ports across into the asset management life cycle and through to monetization preparedness. So we have we're establishing, in the process of establishing, a regular rhythm of readout to our senior leadership and our divisions and up to our CEO across the group. And so the level of engagement on these issues has gone up dramatically over the last 3+ years. We're starting to see that, most focused in climate because it's perhaps the most advanced area, but we've just launched a consultancy to look at social sustainability and really to understand where the aspects are for us in Mubadala that we want to push on. There are so many, it's such a diverse space, but how do we want to port that into our portfolio, both at our corporate level, but importantly down into our operations? How do we want to message our assets and help them focus on making progress? So I guess our basic approach at the asset level, and I appreciate this is not so doable at the 10,000 company level that many of you have to work on in the private space. But we are less concerned about the starting point of our companies and more concerned about whether or not they have a policy and an agenda that's going to create progress to the beat of a drum. And that's what we drive. That's what we focus on. And we use this model that we've created to push that forward. We've got as a corollary to that, we've got an asset management model that's now being piloted with 15 private equity GPs that will. I saw one of the questions was, how do you get beyond the tech box exercise, right? The whole purpose of this model is to get past the canned answers that the lawyers and everybody have vetted for the DDQs and say, okay, you're saying you're managing climate. Like, what are you actually doing? I want to know about your process. When you invest in a high carbon intensity or hard to abate sector, do you do a decarbonization third-party analysis? It's really getting into detailed questions about what their specific approach is. So it's coming, and I know we're fairly progressive in this, but very pragmatic. But we're seeing, similarities across so many of our large asset owners in their own models, in their own way. And that's one of the challenges we need to convene and converge so it doesn't break the system with, hundreds of different types of reports that have to be filled out on the same issues. And so we're trying to do that. We're in an immature space and we need to come together, convene and converge. And I think we're seeing it. I'm super optimistic, by the way.
Thank you. Great to hear some optimism. Emily, perhaps you could provide some sort of closing remarks on what you are doing and reflect on what the panel has said.
Happy to. So from our perspective, we've already talked about how overrun sustainable investing teams are and how we don't want to be a bottleneck. We certainly have a core team that is a center of excellence, and that team is actively embedded across all of our different functions to share insights and talk about trends, to bring in external speakers. But a couple of years ago, we were tasked by our Corporate Sustainable Investing Council, and that's our governance body, the body that really oversees how we approach sustainable investing, our philosophy, our capabilities, recognizing that we needed to expand our training capabilities broadly and at scale. So we were tasked with building out more accessible capabilities, again, kind of in a similar theme. You can't just tick the box and say, we did it, we did a training. You have to make capabilities and information accessible on a regular basis if people are going to actually retain that information. And you also have to foster accountability, because when you say, who wants training, everyone raises their hand. And when you make it available, suddenly none of those hands are up anymore. So the key component of having our Sustainable Investing Council driving this conversation is the people that have a seat at that table are people like our global CEO of our equity platform, our chief business leaders from distribution, compliance, across all of these different functions, and the message is coming from them. So we went to work, we built out across we have an internal training platform where, all of our typical compliance training comes from, our Northern Trust University. It's available to everyone, it's online, it's accessible on demand. And we built out training capabilities in that platform that focus specifically on, here's how we talk about our sustainable investing philosophy. Here's the governance that we bring to our platform. Here's some examples of products and capabilities. Here's how we approach stewardship. So that our partners globally can use those as reference guides time and again to go back and review how we approach these functional and foundational topics through a Northern Trust asset management perspective. We partnered with others like PRI Academy to get external trainings, and we did a deep research on the other kind of preponderance of certifications and trainings that are out there to help guide managers towards what are the deeper trainings available in the market that can keep a faster pace on the rate of change of regulation or things that are more specific to a compliance or a risk or a different functional lens. And then again, we made that accountable and measurable. So we're reporting on a quarterly basis to that council and also to our president on rates of adoption and individuals who are passing the trainings or consuming these trainings. Certainly encouraging our partners to use any and all of the trainings that are now available to them, alongside continuing to participate in those regular touch points and meetings and conversations across the organization. Recognizing that everybody learns differently. People sometimes want to read a paper, other people want to review a video. People are mobilized by external badges that they can put on their LinkedIn. So trying to use all of the tools and mechanisms available to us. And I think if I just sort of reflect on all the things that we're talking about here, right, it doesn't sound that different than best practice risk management, right? We're focused on the TCFD, thinking about, management, strategy, governance, oversight, forward-looking metrics and targets. And that's really, if we want this to be accountable and consumable, and we want to build that momentum so that that can be owned across different functions, we need to use all those same best practices that we've talked about here today.
Thank you so much. I think what we've really heard today is the skills gap is real. There are significant challenges, but there are also reasons to be optimistic. And if we think about this not as developing a whole new set of skills, something separate, a different team responsible for sustainability, ESG, responsible investment, but a core part of the function of the organization, a core part of the role of every investment professional, and something that's integrated into the culture, the ways of working, and of course, ultimately the business practices and the investment process, we can make huge inroads. And I think training is critically important, but it is only one part of that bigger picture. Now, I'm afraid I promised you time for questions and answers. We've had such an interesting panel discussion and some really great contributions that I have totally overrun that, but I'm sure our panelists would be delighted to hang around afterwards for any questions that you may have. Of course, please do submit any questions to us afterwards too. I just wanted to very quickly draw your attention to the PRI Academy. So the PRI Academy is the training arm of the PRI. We take the thought leadership and the work of the PRI and turn that into short, practical, and applied online training courses designed to rapidly build capacity across organizations. We're launching 2 new courses here at PRI in person. One focusing on the emergent issue of nature and biodiversity, providing a rapid means to equip your teams to understand and leverage nature-driven risks and opportunities. And we also have a course called Responsible Investment in 60 Minutes, which is a tool to bring about that common language and understanding that we've discussed today. And finally, here is the QR code. We will be writing up some of the highlights of today's session. We'll provide a practical guide on some of the tips and the insights that we've had from our team here and the panel and speakers, and that will all be accessible a week or so after the conference. So please do scan this and leave your details. Thank you all for coming to this early morning session. Thank you so much, Herry, for presenting the groundbreaking work in Singapore. And thank you to our panel for sharing their insights and being so open about the challenges, the opportunities, and what they found has worked in their organizations. Thank you.